There are four phases to retirement: the pre-go, the go-go, the slow-go, and the no-go years. And here to talk with me about that is Dana Anspach. She is the CEO and founder of Sensible Money. Dana, welcome.
Hi, Bob. I think we are focusing on the go-go years today, so that's a fun and exciting and sometimes somber topic.
Yeah, so this is the second of four parts that we'll do based on a book that you're writing about this topic, in fact.
Yes, I have been inspired to look at these phases of retirement a little differently and see how they overlap and see the different mindset shifts that I watch people go through. And as financial planners, we're in a unique position. I think most of us see our parents and maybe a few family members age, but we see hundreds of households and what they experience and how they experience it. And we want to be able to share that learning with everyone else.
Yeah, so in our first segment, we looked at the pre-go years. Here we'll look at, as you said, the go-go years, which to me sounds like or sometimes I've described it as the no limitation years. These are the years that, right, you've retired and you're presumably healthy and have enough money, and the world is your oyster.
I think that's how we all think of those years. And for some people, I would say maybe there's a group of about a third. It does work exactly that way. They retire, they never look back, they go through that initial, elation phase, this period of freedom, no more Zoom meetings and no more emails to respond to, conference calls and projects and deadlines. I can tell you there's days where that does sound absolutely
It's overwhelming. Yeah.
amazing. Um, but it doesn't work that way for everyone. And so there's another group of people who they go through that initial elation phase, and then they find that rather unfulfilling. They haven't found a new purpose, or they miss certain aspects of work. And for some people, they're able to phase that in a more gradual slowing down of work, less days or less hours, and a gradually scaling up of other areas that they want to focus on or find purpose in. And then there's others where retirement is not for them. And I think we have to think more broadly in these phases and how each person experiences it.
Yeah. I mean, when I think about these years too, right, the image that comes to mind is I'm going to travel more, spend more time with my grandkids, work on my garden, whatever it might be. But that's not what happens in reality, I guess, or doesn't happen two-thirds of the time.
Well, I've seen that happen in reality, and I can think of two examples. One is an accountant who retired, and that is exactly what she does: is spend time with the grandkids, and enjoys it, is able to help her adult children out in that aspect. But she also actually kept working, just at much more limited hours. She likes to help out her old firm during tax season, and so she was able to blend in those go-go years along with continuing to stay tied to her profession. I can think of another case, a retired intellectual property attorney I spoke with, and she retired at 57 and never looked back. And so in a recent meeting, we were asking, what's the secret? What is it that made you just embrace this new phase of life and not miss the old? And she said, I was really good at what I did, but I never loved it. And I think that is perhaps the secret. Some people are in corporate America and they are looking at their work as a way to maximize economic value. And I think that's perfectly okay. And so they're doing a job and that's the extent of it. And when they're ready to be done, they don't look back. And those people have a very different experience transitioning into the go-go phase than people who are very tied to their work. I met with a business owner this week, and they just sold their ownership interest through an employee stock ownership plan and got a substantial lump sum. And I asked, what are you going to do next? And they said, keep working. So we don't own the business anymore, but we love it. And this is where we're going to show up every day. This is what we want to do for the rest of our lives. And so that's a completely different go-go phase. They are still doing what they love. They just took risk off the table and allowed the next generation to really participate in the ownership and the effort that's going to be put in. So there's so many different ways that we may experience that go-go phase. Some of us, I'm a perfect example. I will need to blend in my go-go phase with my pre-go phase. So while I am planning for a 1 day complete exit, for me, it won't be a switch that flips off. I will need to find a way to slowly delegate different things in the firm, find things I really enjoy doing that aren't work related. That's a challenge for me. And phase into retirement over the next 16 years. I'm starting my planning significantly ahead because I get all of these examples to see what different people do. So I think it's important to know ourselves and figure out what is the right path based on our identity and our work situation.
Yeah. For people who are in the pre-go phase and looking to enter the go-go phase, sometimes they might have a date certain that they want to retire. And the research suggests from JP Morgan that you might plan on retiring at 65, but because of a healthcare shock or on a layoff or whatever it may be, that people tend to retire 3 years sooner than their anticipated planned date of retirement. How do you factor all that in, or do you?
Well, it's a challenge. I think you can factor it in by making sure that your plan still works. If you were to retire a few years earlier than you had anticipated, the bigger challenge with a lot of that is the emotional shift that occurs, feeling like it was out of your control. Sometimes some resentment can come along with feeling like you were forced into retirement a few years earlier. And then you don't want that to inhibit your go-go years. Even if it happens a few years earlier than you planned, you still hopefully had some retirement experiences and things that you wanted to do and hobbies you wanted to engage in. So making sure you find a way to work through that and re-engage, allowing yourself some space to go through those normal feelings. We talk about the stages of grief that can actually accompany retirement. It can accompany a forced retirement when you weren't planning on it. So allowing yourself the space to work through that and then really saying, these are my go-go years. What lights me up? What do I want to do that I find to be shiny or sparkly or whatever, bring joy, whatever word resonates with you? And that takes some exploration. I think about that for myself. I used to ride motorcycles, as you know, and I loved it. It was easy for me to not work on a weekend if I had motorcycle rides planned. Now I play pickleball. I'm almost embarrassed. I might have mentioned this before in the shift, but it's fun. I love it. It's not the same. It doesn't light me up the same way. So what will I find that draws me away from work? The things that really I will find joy in. And that is my work to do. Those are things I need to focus on, and that's what's going to make me have a happy retirement one day, is finding those things.
Yeah. So I want to mention something about flexibility. I have a friend who had planned to retire at a date certain, but then had a healthcare shock and now has adjusted his mindset to say, well, instead of maybe stopping work at 65 or 67 and then going to do whatever I was going to do, I'm going to start doing that now. I'm going to phase into retirement starting now, knowing that because of this healthcare shock, I don't know how long I'm going to live, so I might as well enjoy today instead of not enjoying it in the future.
Absolutely. And we've seen that not only with people's personal health care, but perhaps a healthcare situation for a spouse or a close family member that, you know, they realized they really wanted to be there to support that person or needed to be there. And so that changed their retirement plans. When we're talking about all these risks that occur, but there are a lot of people, a client couple comes to mind who enter this go-go phase and truly go and don't experience any setbacks. They travel, they engage in new hobbies or sports. They sometimes take a part-time job, but because they find fulfillment in it, they are able to stay socially engaged, or it allows them access to a hobby that they enjoy doing. I think of a couple who went to work part-time on ski slopes during their retirement. They moved to a mountain location. It's what they loved. So I know we talk about a lot of the risks, but just to bring some lightness to it, there are plenty of people who actually retire and find great joy and, are able to really get the most out of that go-go phase.
Yeah. So I mentioned JP Morgan a little bit ago. There are the research that showed that spending can be sometimes lumpy in the years immediately before or immediately after retirement. Could be anything from a new roof and a new car to a wedding or a big vacation with the grandkids or something, right? I mean, do you experience that with the practice?
We see that all the time, and I read that same report, and I think they even specified generally people whose spending was under about 150,000 a year experience the most, they called it volatility in spending. I thought that was a great term, and yes, we see it constantly. Spending can be lumpy. It might be a remodel you've been waiting to do, a house project you've put off till you had the time. It might be, I had a couple who had a city home and a beach house, and they realized, we don't need a city home. A city condo would suit us more now that we're retired. But they didn't even have, can't talk. They didn't even have the space to make that decision until retirement. And then they were able to say, oh, okay, this doesn't work for us anymore. So let's do this. Well, those kind of changes require down payments and remodeling and moving costs, lumpy expenses that often weren't built into the plan. I had another client years ago who hadn't really thought through what he would do in retirement, was into hunting and camping and fishing. And so immediately upon retiring, bought a new truck and a new camper he could pull behind the truck and all kinds of new equipment. And that took a big chunk out of his nest egg that we hadn't planned on, and put the situation in a little bit more of a constrained situation than what would have been ideal. If that had been planned for, it might have been a different outcome. So it does take some thinking into how will I spend my time and what kind of finances will I need to support my new hobbies.
So there's that person. There's also, it seems like the research again suggests that there are a lot of people who are afraid to spend in the early years, partly because they don't know how long their money needs to last. And you as a planner need to say, look, we've done the plan and you have more than enough, so spend it.
Yes, and those are our favorite plans. We use a set of metrics that we measure every year consistently over time. And as long as those metrics meet certain minimum standards, we encourage people to do the things they want to do in the go-go years. Because of the hundreds of households we've seen, we see that spending naturally slows down as people enter their typically mid 70s. There's one couple I saw where that didn't happen, but they are the exception. Every other couple, you don't say, oh, your spending needs to slow down. And maybe in most cases, it doesn't need to, but it happens naturally. They find at the tail end of those go-go years, traveling or driving across country just sounds perhaps like more effort than it used to. They don't have the energy or enthusiasm. They're more comfortable staying home. They're more comfortable eating at home. So just like we've experienced from our 20s to our 30s to our 40s, I remember when I was still in my 30s, a girlfriend in her mid 40s didn't want to go out dancing or drinking. And I was still in that phase, single. And I couldn't understand, why wouldn't she want to do this? Then I hit my mid 40s. That time where those places became too loud and that wasn't fun anymore. And so that continues as we go through these phases. And so when you have awareness of that, it gives you some freedom to do a little more things while you're in that go-go phase, and can experience it and enjoy it. It will naturally evolve later.
So I know we want to talk about joy, and talking about risk is not necessarily as upbeat as it sounds. But when I think about what planners do is they help people plan for the future. So for someone who's in their go-go years, it all is well and good, but I still need to think about those years where slow go and no go, and or some limitations and major limitations. Do I not? I still have to look forward, right? Not just be in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can gain so much insight from looking forward and saying, how will this change what I might do today? I know we saw, I can't remember the insurance company that put it out, but they allow you to take a photo of yourself and it
I
ages you 20 years.
hate that thing. Yeah.
I just did that at a conference, and it was a little scary.
Yeah, it's very
It
scary.
was. But the goal is to try to help you think of that 80-year-old you while you are still in the 50 or 60-year-old you, and plan for both, and find that balance. And when this logo phase happens, most of the time by that point, if you have done your planning and have solid finances, you are long past worrying about money. Matter of fact, the research shows that typically 2 years after retirement, the financial concerns are on the back burner. They are prevalent as you're making that transition. They take usually the number one priority, and occupy somebody's thinking and mind space. But then 2 years into your go-go phases, it's like, oh, I see how this works now. I'm going to be okay. And you don't think about it as much.
Yeah. I think you and I were on a call with Fritz Gilbert where he said before retirement, he thought about money 90% of the time. And now that he was retired, he only thinks about it 10% of the time.
Yes, and then we see that with our clients too. And then when that slow go phase happens, more time is spent often seeing medical professionals. More time is spent at home, and there's a balance there of realizing during that phase. I think it should really happen toward the tail end of the go go phase, where you have all your cognitive abilities. You really need to start thinking about, what will that last 5 years of your life look like? Do you want to stay in your home as long as possible? What instructions do you want to give to your children? Is it okay for them to put you in a home? I just talked to a family member, an 89-year-old client, who's like, I told my kids, you go live your life. When I get to that phase, you do whatever you need to do, and you go out and live your life. And he and his wife are 89 and still fully, self-sufficient, live in their home. But he doesn't want his kids, rearranging their entire lives for him. And so I think it does help to give some thought to what those later life phases will look like, and make the plans for it now.
So we covered a lot of ground. Is there anything in the book that you've written that we haven't talked about?
I think, a few things. We talked on how spending changes in the go go years. It's lumpy, as you brought up, and you can plan for that. You can build some lumpy expenditures into that phase. I think it's important to know, or to have a set of metrics you can use to determine how much of that extra spending is okay without putting the 80-year-old you at risk. And there is initially in that go-go phase, sometimes oh my gosh, can I actually withdraw money? That is one of the mindset shifts that can be pretty challenging. There is sometimes a emotional shift of, I need to work for a living. And people who are, identify with their career, and particularly identify with earning money and providing for their family, may struggle with that. I'm not earning this, and it can be, this is what people have told me, it can be a hard shift for them to make. So those are some of the things I touch on. The financial shift, we've had many videos talking about the sequence of returns risk, and there are some portfolio structures that can help reduce the impact of that. But really, once you're through the first 5 years of retirement, you are past the most significant retirement red zone time period, and likely you're going to be just fine if you make it past that point. So if you've planned for that 5 years before and 5 years after retirement, now you're into your go-go years. It ideally is that time of truly happiness and joy and free time, and finding a way to enjoy the lack of obligations.
I'm sure a great many people look forward to that, and those who are in it are doing, as you said, enjoying it to the full extent.
I love hearing from people happily retired. We ask clients to send us pictures of them out, doing the things that they love to do. It always warms my heart when I get those. And then, every once in a while we hear from people who struggle with it. And so I think that's why it's important to talk about that and not feel alone out there if that's happening to you. It can be a normal cycle to go through.
Yeah. It is that case where every person has a unique fingerprint when it comes to their life and to their situations.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we love data. we love all these big studies, and now there's big data, and we can look at us as this wide millions of people and what they do, and am I normal? But on an individual level, we all experience things differently, and that has to be taken into account as we go through this journey.